Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And welcome back. Our conversation this morning, as Marlene mentioned just before we went to our first commercial break, is with the unions. We have with us the president of the Belize National Teachers Union, Senator Elena Smith. We also have with us the president of the National Trade Union Congress of Belize, Luis Martinez. And they're both going to tell us about where we are in terms of the negotiations with the government of Belize in respect of the proposed salary cuts going forward. Good morning, guys.
Yeah.
Good morning.
President, good morning.
All right, so we're embarking upon what seems to be a rather divisive issue in terms of the proposed salary cuts and how the public is reacting to it. Some are in support of the position taken by the unions and the public officers. Others in the private sector have their own position that they have taken. Let's begin by talking about the ongoing negotiations with the joint negotiations team. Where are we and what has been that conversation as we lead up to either a counter proposal or the next round of meetings with the government?
Okay, so if I may begin then, we've had an initial meeting with the government officials. That initial meeting was carried out with unions separately. So in February, our meeting was on the 11th, that they met with BNT.U. And then we had a joint meeting with the union, the three public sector unions along with the NT.U.C.B, and that was held on the 4th of March. And so at those meetings, the first meeting was for us to present our views. They did a presentation on state of the economy, and then we were then given a chance to present our views on that and some recommendations in terms of how we believe or what we see that the government can implement to help it in achieving the monies that we need to bridge the gap that we have. The second meeting was with as I said, the joint unions along with the NT.U.C.B. And at that meeting, then we had that joint discussion because we had explained to them, or we had asked of them that we wanted to meet jointly after that initial meeting, that it would have been joint meetings going forward. So at that second meeting, that's where, they presented to us an official document, if you will, detailing the things that they were asking. And then on the 5th, which was a Friday, we got in writing a clearer position in terms of what it is that they are asking of us specifically as union members or as unions, as employees. And that is where that spoke to the 60 million in terms of salary reduction and then the 20 million in terms of increment freeze. After that, BNT.U had a meeting with the government team because I wanted for our council to get the presentation and for them to have a chance to ask their questions. But at that meeting, we also invited the joint unions to be with us in that meeting that we held with the government team the following week. And so that is where we've been in terms of meetings with the government. At this point in time, we have received an official proposal from them, and we are in the process. We met yesterday to work on to complete our counter proposal or our response to their proposal that must be submitted today.
Let's take some time to talk to Luis about where the NT.U.C.B is. We know the BNT.U, as Senator Smith just stated, is working on their counter proposal. What about the other unions?
Yeah, so we have 3 frontline unions that are facing this issue at the moment. And so the National Trade Union Congress is monitoring the situation with extreme vigilance. The idea of removing $60 million out of an economy which is in recession is concerning, and the idea of cutting salary from approximately 14,000 public officers is even more concerning. We are aware that the joint unions, particularly the National Trade Union Congress Public Service Union and the APSSM are putting together their response to the government of Belize.
Yeah.
And we will, that team will provide the general membership at the National Trade Union Congress and what are the directions. And we are definitely requesting our members to stand in solidarity with the three unions. And the spin-off effect on the private sector unions and other unions is going to be equally concerning.
Okay. Let me ask a question here. The Prime Minister made remarks last week that were, very much controversial, and you guys took umbrage to what was said. Let's remove who said it, and let's look at the fact that we are in a situation where there are certain requirements. And in this particular case, the public service and of course the unions are expected to give as part of the sacrifices to be made for us to get out of this situation. This is not something new. I know we've heard of this from last year when the pandemic was just in its initial stages and the economy was already taking a hit. The previous administration made similar recommendations, and together you guys said, well, look, let's explore other options in terms of either savings or revenue collection as opposed to docking our salaries. Where do we stand now? How do you respond to the idea that perhaps more is being requested of you collectively to be able to meet this particular request?
Yeah, very, very good question. And of course, without paying attention to who mentioned it, we all know that the group of people who continues to sacrifice in this country are public officers, teachers, police, BDF, you name it. We are not only giving up monetary sacrifices, and for example, last year, when we gave up our increments, our increment is about 2.5% of your income. And so the individuals in these unions have given up monetary value, and in terms of the time, the sacrifice during a pandemic, when we have elections, these group of people are in the front line. When we have hurricane, so the sacrifice cannot be measured, Isane.
Let me continue with my line of question here. When the pandemic took hold of our country and our economy took a severe hit, a lot of measures were put in place, either in terms of persons who had to be laid off, those in the private sector, either in terms of creating certain work schedules for those of you guys in the public sector, in terms of showing up to work and what have you. Now, when you juxtapose what the measures were that were taken in the private sector space against the measures that were taken in the public service, you have now a situation where, for the most part, public officers are working on a shift system where they go to work on certain days, they're at home on other days, and what have you. And teachers are working from home for the most part because schools are closed. When you listen to what you guys would be putting forward and what the teachers are saying, well, we invest heavily into apparatus, into the classrooms and what have you, but we're at a point in time right now, and I'm not saying that this is a permanent state of affairs, we're simply saying that where we are at the moment, perhaps some of what you're clamoring for or some of what you're putting forward as the reasons why, you should be given some kind of reprieve may not necessarily hold water. How do you respond to that?
But
Yeah, so
Isani, let me just start from the teacher's perspective, and then Brother Luke can speak to
Sure.
Yeah.
public service perspective.
Yeah.
So indeed, as you have said, all throughout the pandemic, our teachers were working. Yes, they were not in the classroom physically, but they were working. And I think we would appreciate that giving online classes has been more difficult than people think it is, and that we thought it would have been. So that in itself has been a challenge. As you rightly said, our teachers continue, even throughout the pandemic, continue to sacrifice, to give out of their own pockets. A lot of the things that the teachers had to do to get our students packages had to be done via their own finances. And so that is one end of it. In terms of, say, sacrificing and comparing us to the other private sector workers, we have to understand that the salaries that we were getting, those were being spent on the businesses as well. So our monies that we had, that we earned, that we worked doubly hard for, we use those to help some of these public sector businesses to remain open. So it is not that because we are teachers and we were not at school, it means that we were not contributing. Imagine removing that $80 million, that total package, from our spending monies that we would have. What do you think would happen out there? What do you think would happen to those businesses? Because we would not be able to go out and purchase as we were doing or as we have been doing throughout this pandemic. Also, we have to consider the fact that a lot of our people have seen where their spouses or maybe their children who live with them have lost jobs. And so these families have now gone from maybe 2 income that they were having to now only having 1. And that 1 income that you are having, which for some is under $2,000 per month, is now going to be cut. So you're going to be having less. So we have to look at the bigger picture. How is this going to affect the bigger picture? I will have less monies in my pocket. I'll be able to spend less. And some of my people might end up at a point where they would need to get assistance from government because they really and truly would not be able to afford it.
So you
all together.
Yeah, you mentioned several things there, and I want to touch on a couple of them. One, last year, and I know it gets lost in the conversation a lot. Last year, there was an increment freeze, and there was the cut in allowances for head of departments. So that was the sacrifice that was made at the start of the pandemic here in Belize when it came to public officers. However, it was well known that this conversation about salary cuts was one that was necessary from then. However, it got delayed, and none other than the former Prime Minister said to himself that whoever is the new leader will have to have these conversations. So that's where we are today. I think the question here is, in your poll to your members so far, there was a question asked about what are you willing to sacrifice to help the economy recover? And that's the question I want to hear from both of you today. What are you willing to sacrifice? Because we know and understand fully well where we are in terms of the economic crisis.
Yeah, Marlene,
we seem to have lost audio there. Yeah.
We keep talking about the sacrifices and what we are willing to give up. And the discussion surrounding the tremendous efforts that have been exercised to present revenue enhancement and cost-saving measures to the government of Belize have been ignored for years. And so the unions are saying, look, come on, man, we have opportunity to gain revenue. Can't go straight into the discussion of salary cuts. That's not reasonable and on the card of we have to sacrifice. We've been sacrificing.
Okay. Now
well, let me get Senator Smith to respond to that one.
Go ahead,
So-
Senator.
Indeed. So to say to me that salary cut would have been a must, I don't agree, because as Brother Luke said, we have been working, we have had our reps working on these cost saving and revenue enhancement measures. We have presented reports to the government. We presented 3 reports. And in those reports, we clearly outlined what are the things that the government should be doing to ensure that it is collecting the revenues that it has out there to be collected, and that it is saving, it is not spending the way it has been spending, because we know if we continue to behave in that manner, what will happen.
Yeah.
As Brother Luke has said, a lot of these things, Marlene, that we have presented, had they been implemented, we would not have been in this position where we are right now. As a matter of fact, right now we have shown where there's more than what they are asking from us. The 80 million, there is more than 80 million out there right now that can be collected. We have over 100 million out there right now that can be collected. And government isn't pursuing that. And we have to ask the question, why is it that we are not pursuing those avenues? Why is it that we are still at a point like this when you are telling me, the worker, that the country is in such a bad state that I must reduce your salary and I must put a hold on your increments that you work so hard for, when you, the government, are at this point in time sending letters to say, listen, give Marlene a break. Marlene has to pay $100,000, let her pay only $50,000. This is not the time for us to be doing those kinds of things, because the country needs every cent that it can get. So we have shown where this country, our governments have been able to collect all of these monies, and we have not been doing our part in terms of being able to go out there and get those monies.
So the question is, in the previous meetings that you've had, and I think people have been following this process, no one was surprised that following municipal elections, the conversation was introduced about salary cuts. But before that, there were a series of consultations held with the unions where you met with the Deputy Prime Minister and other respective ministers to discuss these very same issues. We were told as the media that these were cordial meetings, you felt it was productive. Were these things put on the table as suggestions in how to move forward, and what was the feedback that you got then?
Just to correct though, Marlene, it wasn't a series of meetings. We had one meeting before election, and that was the introductory meeting where they met with the union separately, and we had those discussions. And then after election was when the official proposal, if you will, in terms of putting those in black and white, that was presented to us as union.
Well, you'll forgive my observation here, but this is my perspective on the whole thing. When it was raised as a pertinent issue last year was an election year, so perhaps for political expediency or other purposes, the government then sort of acquiesced, if I may, to what the position was from the unions and sort of moved that aside, perhaps in hopes of winning the general elections in November. So that was set aside then. They did not win. Another party rose to power and is now the government of the day. And just 2 weeks ago, we had another election cycle, the municipal elections. And so if you're saying that there was only one introductory meeting that was held prior to that election, then perhaps it seems that it may have been convenient only to have the topic raised in brief discussion, wait for the outcome of the municipal, and then introduce a more stringent, for want of a better word, a more stringent position in terms of what we need to do to realize these monies. Would that be a fair assessment of what the picture is? Any of you guys?
I would want to agree with you, because yes, indeed, as I said, the initial meeting was just general discussion and presentation on the situation, and general discussion as to what we think or what suggestions we have for the government to be able to realize the funds that it is that we need as a country. And so that was the discussion. We had ask them outright, if that was the position and what that would look like. At that first meeting, they did not commit, or they did not give us any firm indication that salaries would be cut. The comment that they made was, well, we are looking at all angles because we have to see how we can be able to get these sums of monies that we need.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until, as I said, it wasn't until after election, when we met the day after election, that document was shared with us. We discussed that document that came, and then the following day we asked them to put clearly in writing exactly what it is that you are asking of us, because we want for our people to have a clear picture of the request coming from the government. And the following day, which was the Friday the 5th, is when we got that official letter, putting in black and white, simply just taking out the portion that had to do with the request of us. Because the first document had all of those matters in terms of cost saving and revenue enhancement. Some of them had a figure attached to them. For example, like as I said, the reduction in salary had the 60 million, the increment fees had the 20 million, but there were other revenue enhancement measures that were listed that had no figures to them. So there was no indication what would have been yielded from these measures, but they had an amount that they would yield from salary reduction and increment freeze.
Yeah. So from the poll of your membership so far, is it that all branches are saying no to both the salary cut and the increment freeze? Is it the length of time, because both of these would be for 3 years? Is there room for some sort of openness to compromise on this issue? Senator Smith?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, from our end, and Brother Luke can answer for PSU.
Yeah.
From our end, yes, in terms of the reaction to salary cut, that has been across all branches. That teachers are saying that they are not going to accept a salary cut. They cannot afford to have a salary cut at this point in time. In terms of, say, compromise, as you may understand, that portion is wide. Yeah. So there are some teachers who are willing to make some sacrifices in terms of looking at the increment freeze, but the concern is the period of time, because as you would have seen in that presentation that the teacher made, the long-lasting effect of giving up increments as opposed to to doing other things. So we have not, in terms of the responses regarding that compromise, we have had several suggestions in terms of a year or 2 years, or maybe I would be willing to take a cut, but not that amount, maybe 2%, So these varying suggestions were made, but we do not have a majority to say one compromise that we would be willing to make. So we have to now look and see, go back to our members and see, where we would have the majority of people agreeing to what compromise, so that we can be able to present that.
Where are you in terms of the tiered approach, where we look at it similar to how we do the tax bracket? People who earn a certain amount may take a smaller cut, versus those who earn a higher amount may take another cut. Both of you.
Those discussions did come up indeed. Those suggestions were made. But again, Marlene, some of our teachers, a lot of our teachers are saying that if it is that they have to sacrifice, then that sacrifice must come with conditions. Yeah. And those conditions, might be conditions that the government might not be willing to accept, because we are looking at our ministers cutting down on some of those allowances that they get, that we believe are not necessary, especially at this time.
Those are the things like the entertainment allowances, the housing allowances. They have taken a 10% cut, but the allowances, I believe, are still there.
Right, but if you compare 10% cut of 2,000 and you compare 10% of 7 or whatever that total package is that they get, there's no way that will compare. And so if you are getting 10% of 8,000 or 10,000 and I'm getting 10% of 2,000, that's a significant amount for me. And as a teacher, I have to be paying my loans at the bank. I may have to have children, I have students in school, I have to be paying for them because I am still paying now my same school fees. Nothing has changed despite the fact that my child is working from home, is doing classes from home on the computer. I am still paying the $1,000 or whatever amount that is for school fees. That has not changed any at all. So my bills remain the same, but my salary is smaller.
Well, what we're going to do right now is take a quick break. We have a lot more to discuss with the representative of the NT.U.C.B and the BNT.U, but we'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a few.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
And welcome back. We're continuing our conversation this morning with the president of the Belize National Teachers Union and the president of the National Trade Union Congress of Belize. We're discussing the issue of the proposed 10% salary cut that both bodies will be facing. Now, I have a question that I want to pose to you, Senator Smith. We know the BNT.U to be a rather no-nonsense group of persons, a membership organization, and I want to know what's to happen next. You're in a negotiation process at the moment. Should the counter proposal not fly, or should it not be met with the kind of response that you're anticipating, where do you guys go thereafter? What's the plan of action should these counter proposals not be met favorably?
Well, as you may be aware, we have a list of activities being planned leading up to the date of the budget presentation. And we await the response from the government, and that response then would enable us to have another meeting with our council, sharing with our members, and then we get feedback from our members in terms of what next. So indeed, yes, our teachers, I will tell our teachers right now, are not at all happy with the proposals from the government. They are at a point where they are really and truly fed up with what has happened with our governments, and I'm not saying government in terms of just the party that is in power right now. I'm talking about governments in general. So our people are really and truly at a breaking point right now when it comes to the way our governments have been managing our finances, the way we are being treated, because it comes across as if, the people who sacrifice the most are the ones who are being targeted, and the people who have not benefited in any way from having all of these discounts and all of these huge packages are the ones now who have to bear the burden of this country on our shoulders. And so our people right now are not happy, not satisfied, and they are prepared for anything at this point in time. So as we move forward, we as a union, we plan as things change. So we don't put a plan to say, well, this is what we are going to be doing from now until next year. Because things do change, situation is fluid. And as things change, our plans change. So we have to ensure that our actions are matching the changes that are happening.
Is there the potential for a strike?
Well, I would want to think, Marlene, that at a time like this, there's a potential for anything. I mean, you know, we don't know how things would go. We don't know what is going to be the response of the government. And so we have to be prepared for anything. And the same way we have to be prepared for anything from them is the other way around as well. They must be prepared for anything from us as well. And we are not going to be hiding our hands any at all. And as you said, we have never been a union to shy away from taking any action. We have been a union. And if the public wants to be honest and fair, the public can say that we have been a union. We have been one of the unions who have stood up time and time again against governments, red and blue, to ensure that we hold them accountable as best as we can, that there's transparency, there's accountability. We had our strike on good governance. And so we believe that we as teachers have done our part to try to get our governments to govern in a right way.
Senator Smith, how do you put the pandemic into context? Because one of the strengths, and you are right, the unions have repeatedly taken to the streets, sometimes on your own as the only union, for a multitude of issues, from salary adjustments to good governance to the list of demands that you had along with those good governance measures. However, this time, the impact is not going to be the same, because when the children are home with their parents in a strike in normal times, you have everyone's attention, but they're already at home. How do you put that into context, the potential strike action that the teachers or the unions may do at this point?
Well, again, keep in mind, Marlene, that we are approaching this matter as joint unions. So it is not just the BNT.U at this point who would be the main ones taking any action, or the only union being out there. We have the other unions along with us who would be a part of whatever actions we decide that we would be taking as joint unions. So while that may be true, that the impact that we may be able to have as teachers at this point in time because of the current situation may be different from what it would normally be, because governments like to see numbers, and when teachers are out of the classroom physically, it has a bigger impact on what is going on, and people are able to see us. Current situation would not allow us to be able to do certain actions that maybe we would want to take the way we would want to take them. But as we all know, there are many ways to skin a cat. And so teachers are creative, and we know how to work around things. So whatever decision our members give to us, and I'm not saying at this point in time that it is a strike, but whatever decision they give us, we will find a way to carry out those decisions.
Let's get Brother Luke's position on that. As the head of the NT.U.C.B, where do you stand on what is being shared by Senator Smith? Seems as
your mic, Brother Luke.
You may be muted.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Senator Smith had mentioned the joint union approach. And so the mandate has to, and then when it comes to National Trade Union Congress, that mandate will come from our membership. Like I have said earlier, we are monitoring the situation very closely. But I want to go back to a comment which you have made earlier. These types of comments rub the working class in some very serious kind of way. And so particularly to the three unions that are being affected, you mentioned that we've been working at home. The time has been cut in terms of working hours and a whole lot of things. Back to the working at home, working from home. We could tell you that the working from home is not being financed by the government of Belize, which means that public officers have to find data and when we talk about public officers, I'm not saying public service union. Right, so let's make that clear.
Sure.
Public officers need to find money for data. They have to find money for these electronic devices. Some of them didn't have computers, so they go to these learning institutions to purchase computer, iPads, you name it, tablets, you name it. And so we are financing the work from home policies. Isane, the electricity bill goes up, your light bill, your water bill go up. So the government of Belize is not financing these activities. Yeah. So again, it's not fair for us. That is not a fair statement. And now we want to go back to some of the savings, especially the $60 million and that we keep hearing about. So even though the government is reminding us about the wage bill, which is exploding like fireworks. There was a circular last year, Circular 5 of 2020, which was extended by Circular 7 of 2020, and those circulars address a moratorium on hiring. And if the media were to conduct a research on how far are we with that moratorium, we'd see that an excess of $10 million has appeared on the expenditure, the wage bill. So
and these are all with new hires or replacements?
I challenge you to do the research, Sister Marlene.
So let's put it into some context then.
We challenge the media to do the research.
Let's put it into some context then. So you've mentioned the existence of two particular circulars, 5 and 7, that speak to a moratorium on hiring. But we're looking at just recently 250 recruits being taken into the police department. So that flies in the face of both of these moratoriums, correct?
That is correct. But we're not talking about the recruits. You cannot get $10 million out of the recruits.
I know.
It has to be it has to be more than that. And the employment isn't coming. Is not the frontline sectors isn't being. They are not benefiting from that. We're seeing hires all over.
Precisely. That was only one example that I was using. I'm saying that the moratorium speaks to one thing, and perhaps it would have been a collective agreement that we will not proceed with the hiring of anybody going forward. But here comes a party with its own mandate that says, you know what, we'll strengthen this particular area by introducing or adding more officers, more boots on the ground. But we need to pay those people. The salaries for them won't come from nowhere, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so the operations of the government of Belize should not totally rely on the decisions of politicians. We have a Ministry of Finance that is managed by public officers, the financial secretary, right? So the changing a government, we can't buy that. This moratorium has an expiration date, the 21st of March, right? And so we've seen you put out a moratorium and then you continue to hire people. It's ridiculous.
Well, let me get a question in here since we started talking about the police department. I know you're here as the president of the NT.U.C.B, but you're also a member of the department. And looking at the response of Commissioner Williams, who spoke only personally on his point of view, to be absolutely clear.
I am. So I cannot.
No. Let me get to my question. So my question is, there is a police. The commissioner said personally, his personal take was he'd rather a cut than a retrenchment. But the police association is yet to put forward a position. The Nurses Association has put forward their position. They're saying no to a salary cut, and they're going back to the fact that they haven't received the overtime that they were promised early on in the pandemic as well, and the supportive measures that were to be instituted. Has the NT.U.C.B. or the individual unions looked out to reach out to the associations that are affected as well? Maybe they're not union members, but to be able to expand and cover all those who will be affected.
Yeah, very, very, very good question. And when as an umbrella organization, when we hear these types of comments, well, of course, it is prudent for us to reach out to the body which represents police officers. When it comes to the suggestions made by the Commissioner of Police, that's for him to, that's his position, and so I'm not going to knock on his position.
Yes, but my question about working with the associations, I don't know if the commission is a union member. I'm not, that's his personal position. But there's a police association, as there is a nurse association, and there are other associations that do fall under the wage bill that's paid by government.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are open, like I keep saying that the National Trade Union Congress is monitoring the discussions, and we are going to reach out to every single union. In fact, even the private sector. I've mentioned earlier about the spin-off, right? And so the discussion with the private sector employers, we need to remind them that, look, we cannot continue to cut wages from the working class. And this brings us to another concern, which is going to affect the revenue side of this discussion, man. Just from the public sector alone, when you start talking about salary cuts, the government is about to lose over $7 million in tax revenue.
Mm-hmm.
The GST revenue, we are still calculating that. Social security is going to be affected. And when you add the salaries that has been cut by private sector, some of those salaries are taxable salaries. And when you amalgamate all of that, more than $7 million. So we have to cut off and also spike the face.
Senator Smith,
we are trying to raise revenue, and so we cannot take actions that will affect revenue, Marlene.
Let me ask Senator Smith this question. I know we've had so many conversations over the years with union representatives on what seems to be the same issues, and as we face this upcoming proposal for salary cuts and potential increment freeze, we're hearing it once again. And that is, when you talk about the wage bill, who are we actually paying? Who are the workers that are on that list? Who are the contract officers? And also, who are the new hires, now that we bring that into the equation, that this new administration have acquired over the years? I know that was something that was requested of the at the last meeting that you had. What is the status of that, and why is it critical that you get this information?
Okay, so as you said, when we look at the wage bill, we keep hearing about teachers and public officers, and that the bill is so high, and they tend to look at us as if though we are the ones who have the bill where it is. It's not just us, the regular employees. It's all of the other persons who are paid by the government, who are paid via the government purse. So that number then, while we have, I think it's at 14,000 total, we have to look at what percentage of that amount amounts for what amount of that bill. And so you would find that because we are a large number, of course our bill is going to be high, but compare that to the persons, maybe the CEOs and the ministers and all of those other persons with the package that they get, and if you compare that number to the percent of the wage bill as compared to our number and our percent of the wage bill, you would see the difference. And so again, it is difficult it is always difficult for us to get proper information, because when we request information, we do get some, and then when you are sifting through that information, you will find that, but wait, I don't see this department listed here, or I don't see these persons listed here. So where are these persons, and where is the figure for these persons from this ministry or this department? And so a lot of times it is difficult for us to get a true picture of what that number is and what it represents, because for whatever reason, information, statistics, it comes in pieces.
Okay, what you're saying harkens back to a conversation that we had last week with Chief Magistrate Fraser from the APSSM, where we had asked about the same thing, access to certain information that would paint a true picture of what the actual number of persons employed by government is and what the spectrum or the gamut is of the respective salaries. You're looking at a spectrum where you have people on the higher end, and you're also looking at those on the lower end. Now, in that context, I noticed that last week as well, a list was put out in terms of the CEOs and all these other persons who came in with this new government. How does that factor into this equation? Because we're looking at persons who are also being brought on board that are also being paid from the public purse.
Right, and if you notice, some of those persons that you saw on the list would have been persons who are replacing persons who left, like the CEOs, but you also saw some new persons on that list. And we don't know the reason for some of those persons on that list, or we don't even know the role of those persons. For example, we saw things about aides being hired. What are their responsibilities? We don't know. Why is it that we need them? If we look at not just salaries, Isani and Marlene, if you would have seen that interview that Jules did, where he spoke about, the Prime Minister coming in his own vehicle, but he has another vehicle that travels with him, his security forces, and talk about, well, that was a new vehicle being bought. It's like, well, I don't know about that. You're giving me news. These are the kinds of things that we are referring to. It's not just about hiring people or new hires, but it's about all of the other spending that has been happening, that for whatever reason, we seem to want to deny these things are happening, and we don't want to be upfront with these things. All of those things combined are what have us where we are today. And our teachers are saying, and our professors are saying that, listen, if it is that you want to cut our salaries, then these are the things that we are demanding that you do before you even get to that point.
Let's talk about that.
Our demands are to ensure that 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road, we do not come back to the same place again. Those are the kind of demands that we are making of this government right now.
And let's talk about that. I think it's critical that we start to speak about some of the clear areas of wastage that you may have identified, having public servants who are there to witness and see. What are some of the things? I know the revenue collection is one of the top on the list. Talk to us about some of the other areas that you feel need to be addressed before you can have a serious conversation about cutting wages.
Luke, you want to chime in, or should I go ahead?
Yeah, so Marlene, there has to be a time when the government will realize that, look, we cannot continue to, my speaker is on. Yeah, we cannot continue to be to waiver taxes, especially, for example, during the last administration, where they wrote off in excess of $90 million for land tax. That shouldn't have happened, right? And I think that that was done twice. So that's $180 million.
All right, so
why wasn't there any pushback from the public service or the entire apparatus then? You're aware of what took place. seemingly there is an objection to it, why did you guys not then raise your objections openly to say, look, we can't be giving these wealthy landowners any form of relief in the form of tax breaks and what have you?
We
Yeah,
did,
so what
because
I-
that matter came to the Senate, and in the Senate, the NT.U.C.B did
Yes.
object to that, and we did not support that any at all. So we did raise objections to it.
Yes.
I'm talking measures or action being taken. I know that at the upper house, you're comprised of various bodies, the opposition, the government, social partners, etc. But if it's only one or two persons raising objection there, but it does not necessarily translate to action on the ground to say firmly, we're not in support of this. That is where I'm going.
Right.
Yeah,
And Isani,
Isani-
that is where, sorry, but look, just let me
Yeah,
make
it's
one
not
comment.
one of our biggest problem, the timely information and the sharing of this information. We've seen time and time and again where, and this practice has to stop, where Parliament decides that they want to ram certain resolutions and acts and bills through one reading, or even if it goes through one or two readings and it goes to committee, you'll find out that you only have a short period of time, right? And so we keep saying that we need the information. We cannot assist in the process without the timely information and proper information.
Yeah.
These revenue generating departments submit monthly reports to the Ministry of Finance, and so the financial secretary has these information.
So
We are saying that share the information with the union so that we could assist. So when we see a shortfall or we see leakages, we could jump in and assist, so we don't end up that is same position like what Sister Elena said earlier. 5-10 years from now, we'll be here lamenting over the same issues.
Well, I think the point is that is what has happened over the years. We have been speaking about these issues, and you know, I think when people watch what happens, the continuous call is, well, public servants are involved in some of these processes, and that they could flag it earlier, whether to their respective unions, or if they, or perhaps there is a log of these things that may be taking place, and you wait until these moments to bring them out. But moving back to the preliminary question, Senator Smith, guide us through. The clear situation is that you have recognized and you've outlined areas where you know there can be additional revenue coming in beyond going to the salary of a teacher or the salary of a public servant or to a nurse who's been working day in, day out, and people who have given a lot to the country. So tell me where you said you have your demands as to what you want them to see the government do first. Tell us about them.
Okay, so just before I go there, Marlene, we keep looking to the unions to be able to get all of these matters resolved. And while we as unions try our best to ensure, you know, good governance, we go out on the street and we strike, you know, we lose salaries for doing these things. We must recognize that as Belizeans, all of us have a responsibility to do what it is that the unions do. The government, when they were in opposition, they were very weak. They were not doing what it is that they should have been doing as an opposition to hold the government accountable. But yet the unions are the ones being targeted, and we are saying, oh, the unions didn't do this, and where were the unions from 2008? Come on. As Belizeans, when the unions take to the streets, or when the unions raise these issues about good governance, we should see Belizeans in general supporting us, because these are things that will come back to haunt us as they are doing right now. So I just needed to make that very clear. In terms of demands and in terms of expectations, our people are saying, listen, one of the things that we have to look at is asset recovery. We have to look at people enriching themselves so quickly. we have to look at these Whistleblowers Act. We have to look at these kinds of legislation that must be put in place to ensure that when our government officials engage in these kinds of behavior, that we are able to recover and we are able to ensure that they're held accountable. Because the reason why we are where we are is because of the doings of these leaders who we have elected. And if we cannot hold them accountable, if we cannot have a time when we can bring them and get what it is that they have taken from us, then we will forever have this, because other leaders will come in and they will understand that, listen, if I get so many parcels of land, if I, I'm spend money not in the best way, nothing will happen to me. I will retire and I will get my pension and I will move on. So these are some of the things that our people are saying, listen, under UNCAC, these are important matters that we have to push. You cannot just be talking and say, oh, UNCAC. It has to, we have to move to the next phase where we do some continued legislative changes. And don't come and tell me, oh, it's on the table and we will do it. Because when the government wants to make a change, they can go to the House and they can pass a law in one day. Yeah. So if it is that we are serious about these changes that will help our country and will ensure that we don't get to this point again, then we can do that in a day, in 2 days, in a week. We can make those happen. So those are one of the things. The other demands that we are looking at in terms of the allowances that our ministers get, that we spoke about earlier, that we don't believe that they should be getting at this point in time. It is too excessive right now. Go and get a phone plan from BTL or Smart, whichever one of them want, get a phone plan. You don't have to get all of these monies on phone every month. In terms of housing, how many of our ministers, of our leaders have their own homes? 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So what is the need for that? If it is that a minister has to come to a meeting from our district and has to can't get back home because of the time, then listen, man, make a deal with a hotel and say, okay, whenever my ministers have to remain in Milapan for a meeting or in the city for a meeting, they will stay with you and you will offer me some discounts. So these are things that we as unions do for our people. We ensure that we get the best deal when we are spending our money. So why can't the government do the same? We have to look at collecting all that is out there. There's a lot that we can collect. We have how many of these stores who are out there, Marlene, who are not giving people receipts? If we look at that alone, how much can we earn from having these establishments providing people with their GST receipts? Putting these machines where they should be. And it's if you look, it's a lot of times you see where certain stores are the ones that don't do these things. And I will leave but I look to explain a bit in terms of where we are taxing people when goods are brought into this country, and how that works and how we can be earning from that. So those are some of the things that we are looking at, and we are saying to the government, there is monies out there. There are monies out there that you can collect that will help you to bridge this gap that you have. There is no need for your first move to be the easiest one. It's like you're in a fight, and so you're going to target the smallest person because that is the person that you know you can beat. No, man, tackle the big one, because the big one will give you more. And this is what the government seems to be doing. It seems that they want to go to the people who are most vulnerable and who will be most affected and target us by cutting our salary. And our teachers are saying, not so. Well, but we'll come again. Do something else before you come to us, because we will not accept it.
Well, I would want to challenge you on that and say I don't think anyone sees the union as small, and I think that is one of the positive things that we have in our country, that the unions are very active and vocal, and don't shy away from speaking up when their members demand that they do so. But we are on a timeline, and the budget has to be presented, and there are several other things that have to take place before then. You said the counter proposal has been finalized. What is the next step? And are you giving a specific cutoff date for a response? Who wants to chime in on that one? Senator Smith?
We are We are finalizing. We, as I said, we were up until about midnight last night working on that. We have to now share that with our respective councils, just to get a final feedback from them. And we will be meeting again later today to just, fine tune, the last few, cross the last few T's and dot the I's and that kind of thing, and then submit that by this evening. The government side will be discussing, as we have been told, we'll be discussing that tomorrow when cabinet meets. And so we expect that after tomorrow's cabinet meeting that we should be getting some feedback from them in terms of their response to what we would have submitted to them.
All right. Well, we will keep on following, and we appreciate you coming in this morning to talk about the positions that you've put forward so far. And we know that it is a matter of going to your membership and finding out from them directly what they feel is, what their responses are to the proposals. Thank you very much, Senator Smith, and thank you very much, President Martinez, for joining us this morning.
Yeah, Marlene, before we leave, I just want to, Sister Elena made a very important point when she mentioned the point of sale system.
Yeah.
And so while we have a point of sale system in place, we believe that it has to be strengthened. In Bahamas, they were able to raise $91.8 million in 6 months with a strengthened point of sale system. 6 months, right? Remember that they had Hurricane Dorian, and of course they are faced with the same pandemic. So they did it, and we could do it.
All right. Well, Marlene, if you are allowing us our last word, I want to thank you for having us on your show this morning. I want to especially thank our teachers for continuing the hard work that they have been doing. I want to just remind them of our motorcade for tomorrow.
Yes.
And we understand that we may be having not just teachers, but other unions will be joining us. I understand. I'm not sure as yet if that decision has been finalized, but we should be having some other support with our motorcade tomorrow. And we continue to fight. We continue to push on with these matters. And as we said, we will continue to inform and keep our members updated. But as we always say, we shall not be moved. That is our stand, and we will continue with that stand until we can't go anymore.
All right.
All right. So thanks again, guys. It's been an enlightening conversation in terms of the positions that you guys have shared with us, and best of luck going forward. We now go to our commercial break, and when we return, it's to discuss all things International Forest Week. Stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.